Hey, thanks for coming on this journey with me about my discovery of true Mormon history that they never taught in Sunday school. In this video, we're going to talk about another huge part of the church's foundational premise, that Joseph was called of God to bring forth the Book of Mormon and other scriptures for our day. And Joseph's story is that an angel appeared to him and showed him where to find the writings on ancient golden plates, which he then translated using a seer stone to produce what is now known as the Book of Mormon. Now, you'd think it would be easy to find out whether or not Joseph actually had the power to translate ancient writings if you just had access to any of the documents that Joseph has translated and just see if he got it right. Of course, the golden plates that he used to translate the Book of Mormon were conveniently taken up into heaven by an angel, so we don't have access to those to see if he got that right. But luckily, we do have several of the very important documents that Joseph did translate, and if you're a Mormon, 3 of them are sitting inside your scriptures right now. If you look inside your Pearl of Great Price in the Book of Abraham, you will see the 3 Egyptian facsimiles that Joseph found inside the tomb of a mummy that he had purchased from a traveling salesman. Joseph said when he found this papyri that it contained sacred writings about the story of the prophet Abraham, written by the hand of Abraham himself. And if you look on the page in your book with the facsimiles, you will see that Joseph gives an explanation of each element in these pictures. Now, in 1967, the church was gifted these actual papyri that Joseph used to translate, and a church lawyer who was interested in archaeology named Thomas Ferguson wanted to have these independently translated by Egyptian scholars. So he got permission to take them to several Egyptologists at Berkeley and Brown University and have these independently translated. Now, you remember how I said these papyri were found in the tomb of the mummy that Joseph had purchased? Well, it turns out that all of these scholars independently and consistently confirmed that these papyri are common funerary rites from the Book of the Dead for the man they were buried with named Hor. Now, even the church admits this on their official website in the Gospel Essays section, that scholars have identified the papyrus fragments as standard funerary texts that were deposited with mummified bodies. The problem is Joseph didn't say these were funeral documents for the man named Hor. He said they were sacred writings written by the hand of Abraham himself, and he even provided a translation for each of the different elements of the facsimiles that are sitting in your scriptures right now. Here we have the explanations given by Joseph Smith on one side, and you'll see the true translation given by Egyptian scholars on the other side. So let's take a look at how different Joseph's translation of this first facsimile is. He says this guy is Abraham on an altar, when it's actually the deceased man named Hor on a lion couch. He names all of these idolatrous gods when these are actually just jars containing Hor's internal organs. He gives a very long-winded and complicated explanation on number 12 when it actually just represents water. And in the second facsimile here, we see yet more of this incorrect labeling done by Joseph Smith on the left next to the actual Egyptian translation on the right. One of the things that really stood out to me on this as being out of place was that 8 through 21, Joseph promises to reveal at a later date in the due time of the Lord. Yet we clearly have an explanation for all of these by Egyptian scholars that these are just standard funerary elements normally included with the deceased person to grant their safe passage into the afterlife. And I'll include the sources from these scholars and the church's admission to these facts in the description below. And then here's the last facsimile with yet another list of translations that Joseph got completely wrong. The church even admits on their official website that Mormon and non-Mormon Egyptologists agree that the characters on the fragments do not match the translation given in the Book of Abraham. So when I see these facsimiles and Joseph's attempted translation alongside them, there are a few things that really just amaze me. First of all, I noticed what an incredible imagination Joseph had for coming up with names of people and gods depicted in these pictures that weren't actually there. And this part of facsimile too just gets me when it says something can't be revealed outside the temple, yet Egyptian scholars just revealed it. And it's just a simple plea that the soul of Osiris may live. And then that he ran out of explanations for 9 through 23, so he just said they'd be revealed in the due time of the Lord. To me, it just looks like he was getting tired of coming up with all these names. So the church's response to Joseph's clearly incorrect translation of these facsimiles is to just ignore the fact that he got these translations completely wrong and instead focus on the idea that Joseph didn't even need the papyri to create the Book of Abraham. So they fully admit that the text of the Book of Abraham has nothing to do with what was written on these papyri, but they just are grasping onto the idea that Joseph just used it for inspiration. And their current theory is that the text must have come by revelation, fully composed through the inspired mind of Joseph Smith. Now, to me, this is a pretty big thing to admit because they're admitting that Joseph Smith was fully capable of composing an entire book of scripture without having anything in front of him to translate from. We know that the church has also come out now and admitted that Joseph Smith never actually looked at the golden plates to translate, and we know that he dictated the entire Book of Mormon to his scribes while looking at a rock in his hat. Now, the reason this is important is because the church has always painted Joseph Smith as this uneducated farm boy who couldn't possibly have composed any of the books of scripture that he produced. But yet, from the accounts of those who knew him, we know that he was an incredibly talented orator who had a gift with spoken language. We know that he dictated the entire Doctrine and Covenants with new revelations that his scribes wrote down as fast as they could as they poured out of Joseph. We also know from personal accounts of those who knew him that he could memorize large passages of scriptures and gave powerful sermons that were completely unscripted. We know that he was incredibly charismatic and had a way of endearing people to him instantly. To me, knowing what a brilliant orator he clearly was, it's entirely possible and highly expected that a man like this could dictate entire books of scripture on the spot. He rarely did any of his own writing, and he used scribes for all of the books of scripture that we have. And it's important to keep this in mind when you think about the vast amount of material that Joseph produced in his lifetime and the way in which he produced them. But let's get back to talking about the actual documents that we have that Joseph has translated. So in addition to the problems with the 3 facsimiles that we know he translated incorrectly, Joseph also produced a book of grammar with Egyptian characters and their explanations. And even the church has admitted on their website that Joseph got this entire book of translations wrong, stating, quote, "Neither the rules nor the translations in the grammar book correspond to those recognized by Egyptologists today." So that's 4 of the existing documents that we have that Joseph has translated that we know he translated incorrectly. But then we have the Kinderhook plates. In History of the Church, Joseph Smith discusses 6 brass plates covered with ancient characters and a skeleton which must have stood 9 feet high, found by 9 locals as they explored the area around Kinderhook, Illinois. Joseph Smith wrote, "I have translated a portion of them, and they contain the history of the person with whom they were found. He was a descendant of Ham through the loins of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and that he received his kingdom from the ruler of heaven and earth." Many years later, a man named Wilbur Fugate was one of the group that found the plates, admitted that they had been created as a hoax to expose the prophet Joseph Smith. It's important to note that by this time the church had been using the plates as a faith-promoting material that they believed Joseph had translated correctly. So when Wilbur came out about the forgery, they stubbornly attacked his character, refuted his story, and maintained the idea that these plates were ancient artifacts. Then in 1980, the plates were conclusively shown by chemical and electronic analysis to have been produced in the 1800s in the exact manner as Wilbur had described, and were not ancient artifacts. It turns out the inscriptions were meaningless symbols invented by the hoaxers who created them, and were not in any language about a man named Ham. So make that 5 documents that we have that Joseph claims to have translated that have all been proven to have been translated incorrectly. But since we don't have the material that the Book of Mormon was translated from, the church is still hanging on to the hope that maybe 1 out of the 6 documents that Joseph claims to have translated was actually translated correctly. Okay, so that was a lot of information, and I know that finding this out for the first time can feel totally overwhelming. And I had this sense of just totally being betrayed. Like, why didn't anybody tell me this information? And why in church are they continually telling you not to listen to what other people are saying about Joseph Smith? Hopefully it's becoming a lot more clear why they're telling you not to listen to this information. It's very upsetting, and it doesn't paint the church or Joseph Smith or the Book of Mormon in a good light. But to me, it was worth it to find out the truth at all costs. And even if it feels like your entire Mormon world is imploding, I want you to know that I know how it feels, and that's why I'm making these videos, so that I can help people through this journey of a faith crisis. And I want to help you, and I want to be here for you. So leave a comment. Let me know how you're feeling right now. I know that it doesn't feel good finding this out. And I just want you to know that it gets better. There's an entire community of people who have gone through this, finding out the information about church history for the first time, and they're an amazingly incredible community of support. With that said, I hope you will continue on this journey with me and find out the truth at all costs. You have the right to know about the Book of Mormon. In the next video, I'm going to talk about the problems in the Book of Mormon. So thanks so much for everyone who has stuck with me through this journey, and I hope you will join me in the next video. Thanks for watching.